we sail a little bit high.
Welcome back to the second episode of Unwrapped. I am Danny, and before we get started, oh my god, thank you all so much for your support on that first video. And I hear you, and I will make more videos and tutorials. I'm just trying to figure out time management with all of the projects that I have going on right now, but we will get there, I promise. Now that that's out of the way, this is what we're doing today. It's a ring inspired by the Eye of Horus. So for this project, you will need a mandrel to size your ring, as well as some kind of anvil and hammer. I am using 14 gauge dead soft pure copper round wire and 24 gauge of this same. And you don't have to actually, oh, that's me dropping it. You don't have to use that big of wire if you don't want it to be so bulky. It did turn out a little bit large, but I still like it. I am still going to make some with some 20 and some 28, I think. You will need a bead of your choice. I was going to use those green ones and then I changed my mind later, but I am still going to make some with those beads. And of course, your pliers. So if I'm being honest, I almost never measure out my wire. This was about a foot long and I ended up having like 3 or 4 inches of extra scrap at the end, so yeah, give or take 8-9 inches. And we're going to start by making the eye shape, which is actually almost like a fish. So we'll start with making a fish, but it'll turn into an eye in a little bit. Here you can see me just kind of spreading it open a little bit. It was a little too squinty for me, and so I was just widening it up a bit. Once we have the eye the shape that we like, we'll take those 2 tails and try to straighten them out as much as possible. We're going to be weaving them together and we want them to be pretty tight. By the way, if you see me pause a lot, I came up with this design like maybe an hour before this video, so I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. So we're going to start our weave here. And this is the simplest weave in the book. It is X amount of times around one wire and then X amount of times around both wires. Now I did 4 around the single wire and 3 around both wires, and you don't have to do that. It does not matter how many you do. If you want 4 and 2 or 1 and 4, whatever you want, you can do with this part. The most important tip that I have for you while you do this is to keep it tight, which is especially hard with 14 gauge. So just as tight as you possibly can. If you didn't catch my first video, I always stop at several points throughout a weave or a wrap to tighten it all up and make sure that it's all as tight as it possibly can be. I'm going to speed this part up because it's pretty repetitive, but you're just going to keep going until it's the length that you need for the finger that you want it to be on. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm not incredibly technical, and I'm sure there's a way to measure it out. I don't know what it is, so I just kind of keep going and then test it on the mandrel to see if it fits all the way around. And here you get to see me not being technical and trying to figure out sizing just by slapping it on the mandrel. Now is really my favorite part. I really like hammering copper, and I need a metal mandrel, and I've got one on the way, but for now I'm just destroying this one with my hammer by hammering it into shape around the mandrel. So right about here is kind of where I figured out that this is enough weave to make it all the way around like I need it to. And I'm going to snip off the excess. I do not ever start or end with it wrapped around 2 wires. Always 1 wire, it's tighter, and I'm weird about security and durability, and it just seems to work out the best. This is an OCD moment. I had 1 more coil around the beginning than I had at the end, so I was just evening it out. So this is where I take a little breath of relief, because I really do not like to weave at all. Wrapping is fine, I love it. Hammering, fine. Weaving, not my thing. But it does look nice, so here we are. So notice that I have the tail of the ring coming down underneath the eye, but still pretty well lined up with it. And here I go again, destroying my mandrel with my hammer, but the eye has to be curved because it's going to be on a finger, and fingers are curved. So now we're going to start splitting up those 2 wires to create the line and the little swirly under the eye. Now the first one towards the inner corner of the eye, that one's going to go straight down, and we're almost done with that one. The other one we're going to attach to the bottom, the lower lid of the eye. Using that same 24 gauge, I'm going to wrap it around that lower lid and that second wire. Like I mentioned earlier, I never start or finish around 2 wires, so I'm wrapping it around that first wire right under the lower lid. I'm going to wrap it around that wire a few times to secure it. Now back with the other end, I'm going to wrap it around both a few times. Yeah, I just dropped it again. After a good 5 or 6 wraps around, it's time to put in that iris. I wish I would have stuck with these smaller beads because I ended up thinking they were too small and I wanted to try a larger one, and then I regretted it, so probably stick with a smaller one unless you like how the big one turns out. It goes right on that same wire that we were wrapping around the 2 of them, and then we're going to wrap it around the top 1 or 2 times. And here's where mistakes were made with that huge giant bead. But wire wrapping is a learning process for the rest of your life. That was my baby. Here you saw I just wrapped it around 2 times, and if the hole is large enough, I prefer to put the wire back through the bead. Sometimes it's not large enough, and that's okay, it still looks good. From here, we're actually going to keep wrapping those 2 wires together just a couple of times. I like to make that wire parallel with the lower lid because I feel like that's the best way to make it pretty tight. Now if you look at the Eye of Horus, you notice that I dropped it again. Both of the lines that come out of the eye, they're sort of towards one side. It's not like right and left or in the center. So I'm pushing these as far to the left as I can. And I probably, in the future, will only wrap it maybe 2 or 3 times instead of like the 4 or 5 that I did here. And of course, wrapping it around just the 1 wire to finish it off and not both for security. So I have trimmed this first wire and I'm hammering it now. And as I'm making this video, I just realized there's really no point to it. I just like how it looks. Now we're going to start bending that second wire into shape, trimming it, and then making the little swirl. Here I'm just filing away all of the sharp edges, especially if you are selling jewelry, you know. Yeah, if you're selling it, make sure it's not sharp. This is just a nail file, a metal nail file. And the anvil that I use, my father-in-law works in a steel factory and I got that from him, so use what you got. Here I decided that first one was way too long and I went ahead and I trimmed it. After filing away all of the sharp edges, now I'm putting it back on the mandrel to beat it up a little bit more and finish shaping it off. And it is finished. Granted, the smaller bead looks so much better, but I still, the big bead's okay. I'm gonna keep it for now. I don't know if I'll sell it, we'll see. And since these rings are hammered, they're gonna look even that much cooler once they're oxidized. All of those textures are gonna come out. It's gonna be beautiful. Thank you guys again for all of your support. It has been so overwhelming. I couldn't not make another video. Hopefully you guys learned something today. I know I did. And we'll see you next time.